There was a cry and a weeping and a sorrow like I have never heard before. And as these men suffered for the rapes, the molestations, the killings, the wars, the atrocities to women and children and the land, there was such a sorrow and such a pain that was expressed. Some of them contorted, some of them bent completely backwards, some of them fell to the ground. This wailing and this weeping and this gut-wrenching cry came from them. And as this happened, I was in charge of making sure they were safe. I was in charge of keeping the energy strong, making sure that this sorrow was given to mother and to father where it was kept safe and held. As I went from gentleman to gentleman and saw them weeping and hurting, I placed my hands on their hearts, and as I did, I saw what they were seeing, and I felt what they were feeling. These men took on something more extraordinary than has probably ever happened on our planet. They took on the pain of the feminine. These men also felt their own wounds. It has not just been the feminine that has suffered. Men have not been allowed to cry. Men have not been allowed to come from their heart. Men have had to kill when they did not want to. And so their suffering was great. And as this continued, I kept praying, let it be over, let it be over. I didn't want to see anymore. The women held hands in a larger circle on the outside of their small circle. And as this was happening, the women rose their energy to a very extremely high level to help these gentlemen and to give them love and to give them strength as they suffered. A feminine tenderness, a gentleness, a mothering was felt by these women who held these men. At one point, as I was going around and around, things were getting quite intense. And I began to see something that I had never seen before. And I've seen some things. But as these men suffered, the ancient ones, the spirits of many, many other gentlemen were moving in to the men who were standing holding circle. And as these ancestors were healing their wounds through these men, the men's cries would shift, they would change. They were truly taking on the aches and the pains and the sorrows of others who have passed. It was quite extraordinary. At one point, the energy became too strong for me to hold. And I asked the women to please break any Reiki masters, any healers, to please come into the circle and begin to help me hold that energy for the men, as I became very drained very quickly. And as we held them, as we put our hands on them, finally the answer came, it is done. I think those were the best words I could have ever heard. These men suffered greatly for something so beautiful. The feminine was finally witnessed. Their suffering was finally witnessed. And I say to you now with a surety, something changed. There was a sorrow that was lifted. I think by the time I said it is done and we all broke hands, all of us wanted just to fall down and cry. I have said it 100 times since, and I will say it again. There are some men in this room who were in that circle, and I say to you, I love you. I love you deeply. And I say thank you.
What I realized when you said we need to put our old ways in a bag and leave it on the ground, was I was thinking of the children who witnessed that ceremony and got to actually see men feel and express to that level, knowing that they were feeling the grief of what the masculine has done. And I will always bring my son to ceremony like that, knowing that what he's learning is what we need to know now.
The women had to go next. I was instructed to have them not make a full circle, but a half of a circle, a chalice, a womb. And so as they got in this half circle, they held hands, and the men were to get in a straight line over the chalice, almost like a bowl with a lid, if you can imagine. The men held hands. They rose their energy as high as they could to hold the space for the women as they wept. It was now the women's turn to hold hands and to let go of a suffering that the female, the feminine energy has suffered for so many years. In my mind, I thought that this would, after seeing the men suffer, I thought, how in the world are we going to do this with the women? So many of us have been injured. As I looked at some of the women, I know what they have gone through. And I thought, how are we going to do this? We suffered for our children, for ourselves, for our mothers, for our grandmothers who have been treated like cattle, for the ancient ones that were worth nothing. There's so much suffering to be done by the feminine. For so long we have been abused or completely overlooked. And so when we began, I was quite afraid. But something very different started to happen. As I went from woman to woman and placed my hands on, I was told, the womb. I didn't know why at that time, but the crying really didn't come out. There was a slow moan. There was a groaning. But then I figured out as I was going from womb to womb, they were still holding on. Women have been taught just to deal with it for so long that even now in this sacred space, when they were asked just to grieve, just to let it go, they were still holding on. And so it took a longer time for the women to finally let go. And as I went from womb to womb, a great sob started to emerge. A raw and gut-wrenching sob. Some women scream. Once again, as I moved from individual to individual, I saw what some have gone through. Such damage. And yet, as they wept and as they cried, as they fell to the ground, this sobbing continued, and it was given to Mother. There was a space and a place for this deep hurt, this deep pain to go into the earth, to be held by our great Mother. And there was a letting go of pain that has never been able to come out. And these great men held such wonderful, positive energy. And finally, when it was done, and I said it was done, still some women, and I thought this was just me, but many women saw it. Some women had turned into complete light. Some women turned into almost a metallic silver as they wept on the ground. Shifts were truly